Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
Welcome back, everybody, as we have another fabulous conversation this month. This month long on the podcast, we are talking about innovation. And specifically, we're taking a look at how innovation is going to affect education, and even spread out a little bit further to other industries, right? So the minute you start seeing innovation happening in one sector, you'll see it through, because a lot of times there are some really great things that can come from innovation. With us today is Dr. Julie Allen. She is a program coordinator for the Medical Assisting and Billing and Coding program out of the campus of Keiser University, and Associate Dean Melissa Otero, who is over all of our allied health programs. And who better to start this conversation than these two, as we start to look at the innovations that are happening in the health world, as well as how it's coming into education. And specifically, Dr. Allen and Dean Melissa, the World Health Organization in 2023, I think this is a great thing to kick off our conversation on AI. They came out with a pretty firm stance on their opinion on AI and what that looks like for the health industry. So they did it in a very, I think, a brilliant way, to be honest, because it played on everybody's fears. They brought out a robot at their organizational meeting in May. They started asking the robot questions, and it just started blending. Now, obviously, the questions were health related, but they did it to prove a point. These robots are responding with, straightforward answers, but they're not taking into consideration individuals' feelings, emotions, personal preferences. And they turned it back to the audience and they said, so who do you want to make your health decisions? And so I think that's a fabulous way to describe AI. And when we talk AI in education or AI in health, how would you define AI? I think that would be a great way to look at it. I know we all say it's artificial intelligence, but what exactly does that mean?
I tend to think of it as generative technology that can create, whether it's imagery or even music or text. That's how I tend to think of AI. I know it goes beyond that, but I think that those are the examples that I see most often right now. Is we're still, I think at the infancy stage of what we will eventually see in AI.
Yeah, I agree that you see it with the text generative kind of programs like Chat GPT, but through music and art. I think it's probably more ingrained than we realize within our daily systems. I know I've seen studies actually with student services, colleges using AI for asking new students say like questions on an iPad or something, and and then it responding to help them maybe find a class that they need to take, or an organization that they want to join or something. So I think it's definitely more ingrained than we realize, and will become more so as it gets the technology gets better.
And some of the ways I think in education, when we talk about AI versus healthcare, I know healthcare, they're talking like robots performing surgeries, making health decisions, maybe cutting nurses out, I think, which is everybody's biggest fear, is jobs going away. Education, for us, we really have a lot of conversations about Chat GPT and it's back and forth. So a lot of people have an idea of what Chat GPT is. A lot of people don't know what Chat GPT is, so we're kind of on two opposite ends of the spectrum. And I know, Melissa, you've done a lot of work on Chat GPT, but just so that way we're all working with the same terminology, what is Chat GPT?
It's a text generative, language model. It does not think. You ask it a question, it responds to the question based off of its data bank that it's pulling from the internet. It in a sense makes a decision, based off of all this data. This is a good response, and it's based off of an algorithm. So it's it's not human. It's not really the human brain, but it can give, a decent response based off of its background, the data that it has. But it really is just in a sense regurgitating what's already out there.
Then how are we using it? How are we seeing something such as ChatGPT, which is in use? It's an example of AI. It's an LMS system. How is that being used in education?
Ooh, big question. Do you want to go, Dr. Allen?
Sure. So I think in education, we have a little bit of a unique perspective in which we tend to look at these AI tools from multiple perspectives. Both how can we use them ourselves to better meet the individual needs of our students, to more efficiently produce content or resources. But then we have the flip side of that as well, where we're also always trying to, think about how we can prevent students from overutilizing a tool that is a short-term crutch that's going to be a long-term hindrance when it allows them to forego the development of important foundational skills that they need, or looking for answers elsewhere as opposed to the specific content that we've created, trying to get them to those learning outcomes that we've set for their program. So I do think that we have a lot on our plates in education in terms of, both trying to identify the best and most appropriate ways that we can use this technology in our field to better serve our students and our stakeholders, but then also that flip side, how are we going to combat this, this barrier, what becomes, I think, a barrier in a lot of ways to learning. And yes, it can be leveraged. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a bit as well, but we have to think about it from both sides.
Right. That's pretty much what a lot of my research has shown is the threat and the opportunity that it provides. And so initially I started researching it was because of the threat. I'm a writing teacher by heart, and it's like death of the English comp class. I'm like, what do you mean? And so I started doing a little bit more research and talking to people about it, and realized that yes, there are going to be students who are going to use it incorrectly and unethically. Say for copying and pasting a whole paper over from it. The hope, I think, with most educators is that we see it as an opportunity. How can we utilize this as a tool? How can our students utilize it as a tool to make their life easier? How can educators use it as a tool? And, as Dr. Allen says, we as educators are going to need to change our frame of thinking in using it and trying to find ways to use it effectively. It's very interesting. Many professors I've talked to discuss, putting it out in the front. They're like, yeah, use ChatGPT. Go ahead, put a question in there, my prompt, use it, and then let's see what's not working. Whether it's misinformation that it's giving, whether it's not really answering the question, if it's literature teachers are in an uproar about how it makes up characters. They're like, I thought I read that story, and going back to read. So, it's a little bit of both the opportunity and the threat, and but it's here. It's here. So, I think that once you get over that initial thought of the threat, it's really no different than, some other, we used to call them like essay, like warehouses, on the internet and stuff, that, it really is not much different. It's a matter of us being aware and letting our students know that we're aware of this, and it's not perfect.
So what would you guys say would be the real true risk and concerns with it? Is it just simply that idea of plagiarism, or is there more to it than that?
I think in education that probably plagiarism is the main aspect. I think in the world, whenever you look outside of education with AI in general, the threats are a lot larger. Like, if you think of all the movies like Terminator, in a sense, was this idea of artificial intelligence taking us over, it becoming smarter than the human being. And so I think whenever you have change like that, it's scary to people. You mentioned job losses, so it's like what jobs are we possibly will possibly be phased out because AI can do it for them, and how will that change the makeup of a job? You mentioned health and healthcare, and I thought an AI could probably do my intake as a patient, my blood pressure, my weight, whatever, get my symptoms, but as you also mentioned, it's not going to get, that, well, the reason why my blood pressure is high is because, I work 80 hours a week or something, it's not going to understand that aspect as to, diagnosing me or something, so I can see some benefits to it, but complete dependency on it, I think is the fear. From an education standpoint, professors talk a lot about the loss of creativity. They can tell in the reading of say discussion forums, and Dr. Allen could probably talk about this too. It's just all kind of the same, and you know with human beings, you get a little bit more emotion and personalization, and so if students are depending on just AI to write stuff for them, we lose that humanity.
And I agree with everything that you said. I think that one of the other threats that we have in education is not just the fact that students might be utilizing AI tools to replace their own work. I think in some ways we can incorporate that technology and ask them to compare. If you were looking at an article, for example, what's the AI summary versus your own AI summary, and what did you catch that the tool missed? So that really still involves some analytical skills that can be beneficial to the student in a real world environment, because they can draw from that tool in a real world if they were looking at analyzing or summarizing an article or a report. But on the flip side of that, sometimes, we need students to work on some of those more rudimentary or basic level skills, I guess is a better word, their writing skills. So for example, if you have a nurse or a medical assistant who is going to be documenting in a patient's health record, that's a legal document that can be subpoenaed and that can be used as evidence in legal cases. And when you consider the fact that a student could have, potentially in theory, they could have gone through school utilizing that tool and never developing their own skill for writing the proper structure of a sentence so that they're representing the information that they obtained in an accurate way, that can be really dangerous, not just for the patient, but also for the physician that they practice under. And then, Melissa or Dean Otero had also, talked about the widespread concerns, the threats of job loss. I think that happens every time we have a new technological advancement that's, maybe this one's the most, sweeping or impactful. But I mean, years ago, we were worried about, about people losing their jobs due to, the technological abilities of, factories and things of that nature. So, in that sense, when you bring it back to the educational perspective, you also have to think about, are the programs that you're teaching, are those going to lend to fields that are going to be there long term? That's a consideration too, because a nursing program or some of these educational programs that lead to degrees, they're a huge investment of time and money for students. And I think that we have a social responsibility to consider, what's the longevity of the fields that we're graduating these students into. So I think that that's a threat that we look at both widespread across industries in terms of job loss, but also from the standpoint of an academic institution.
And I think you have a very, very valid point with that. And I almost feel that it's an opportunity. There's going to be a shift in the industry. So it's not that jobs will be fully taken away. Maybe specific positions will be, but like to reference another movie, because I think sometimes movies do a great job of going back historically and presenting things in a better picture. If you look at the movie Hidden Figures, which was released in the last couple of years, and it's about African American women who made a difference in NASA. They were able to help with the space flight, and behind that, you saw that here they were manually typing up reports, and then you saw the integration of the first computer, and they couldn't just integrate the computer. They needed operators, they needed programmers, they needed technicians, and you saw that same group of women shift their skill set to learn how to be that person. So it wasn't a straight out job elimination, as we have seen historically, because we have seen innovation throughout history, factories and look at automotive and everything like that. There was a shift and a change in the dynamic, a dynamical change in the workforce that would have impact on education, right? You would lose a program, But then at the same other hand, you'd have to gain a program because you'd have to learn those skill sets to be able to properly modify AI. But with that, since we're still talking kind of about those risks and concerns, we had an interesting conversation a couple months ago in a student seminar about what is, and I'd like to hear your guys' input, what is the difference between me putting my paper into ChatGPT or me emailing, one of my friends and saying, hey, can you review my paper and let me know what you think if I should make any suggestions? And they come back with, oh, I think you should change this phrase. I think you should reword it like this. What's the difference? Like, is it not the same?
Or even, I'll mention even Grammarly, because Grammarly is widely accepted. It is not seen as a cheating tool, whereas ChatGPT is. And it's interesting because in essence, they basically do the same thing as you just mentioned. They're, getting feedback, say, on their own paper, on revisions, but it's just not seen that way. And it may be the wealth of information, with Grammarly, it's looking directly at your paper, whereas I guess with ChatGPT, you're kind of asking it to maybe write the paper for you. Maybe that's, kind of a difference. But I don't really think, I think this goes more to that opportunity side, that it can be used as an assistant, a writing assistant, a writing tool. It can, definitely help students. If you think of students that maybe have a second language learner that, maybe has, lower writing or communication skills in the English language, it can be very beneficial, both Grammarly and ChatGPT, in helping them, develop, their vocabulary and sentence structure if it's used for that purpose. The student has to go back to it and, review the responses, make critical decisions as to do I want to or not want to use this. Grammarly will correct my work, and I look at it, I'm like, no, I really like that word choice, Grammarly. I'm going to keep it, and that's my choice. I'm a critical thinker and I'm a writer, so I'm having a conversation with the program in that way. That's what we want our students to do. We want them to have a conversation, not just take it as a blanket. This is the correct way to do it. Copy and paste it over.
And I think that really emphasizes how important it is to consider the intention of use. Now, if a student is using AI tools such as ChatGPT to generate their own work for them, they're not engaging in the learning process. So they're, really missing the point of the instruction. Versus if, Heather, as you had mentioned, if you have a student that puts their paper into ChatGPT and you give it the prompt to review my work, correct any grammatical issues, well, I would say one difference between utilizing, a friend or a writing coach versus ChatGPT is it's just going to change it. You're never going to notice exactly what it changed or why. Versus if you're looking at, Grammarly, you're going through line by line, or if you're utilizing a writing coach. So you're still engaging in that learning process. And then even if you put that prompt into ChatGPT and it spits out an answer, maybe you're looking through it again to make sure it's the way that you want to, the way that you want to present the information. It still doesn't give you that coaching that you might benefit from. So again, I think it all comes down to the intention of use. I tell students, listen, if you really want to use this to help you, ask the system to generate an outline, right? Because that's the thing students struggle with, I think, the most in writing, in my own experience, and mine is nowhere near as expansive as Dean Otero's in the field of writing, correcting students' writing. But I often find students struggle with writing is getting that initial outline done. So that's a way that you can utilize a tool to actually help you improve your own work. But I think part of the other threat is, with ChatGPT, if you don't know your content, you don't know if you're getting misinformation or not. And that's a real danger across the industries. I've actually seen in some student papers, sometimes it will catch it. So I threw a Trojan horse into one of my discussion prompts that said, we had a female patient, and I said, book her for a prostate exam. And I ran it through ChatGPT, and ChatGPT caught that one. And it said, a female patient is not going to have a prostate exam. But it doesn't catch everything. So, I do think that just solely relying on Chat GPT is kind of a danger when it comes to misinformation or misrepresentation.
Are there other ethical dilemmas that come with, the AI and with the Chat GPT? I know we're talking about like, the plagiarism, and for us in education, that's a big ethical dilemma that we have to feature. Do we allow students to use it? Do we not allow? But are there other ethical dilemmas that are going to be posed by AI or even Chat GPT? I know we keep talking about that specifically because that's what we're seeing, in education.
I would say definitely there are, other ethical considerations, visiting back to the use of AI in the medical field. I mean, these physicians, you enter into a physician-patient contract that, they're going to provide care, and there are specific guidelines that go along with that. And ultimately, those physicians and clinicians are responsible for those decisions. So for the medical assistants, the nurses that work underneath them, if they're given prompts, for example, in their EHR system, that it's an AI recommendation, right? And we have alert fatigue. We have it in other areas of the EHR system where things pop up too frequently, and you just adapt and start ignoring those. So that reverse, I think, could be said for when you have AI generation within those EHR systems, that, you just get used to accepting what it says. But at the end of the day, we have human beings that are responsible, human beings that are the result of that care. But then also human beings who have gone through a lengthy educational journey to become a doctor, and could potentially have their license to practice removed or revoked due to mistakes that might happen as a result of AI and healthcare. So I do think that's something that we certainly have to be cognizant of.
I think also the makeup. I mean, ChatGPT has come out and said that it used, the internet. I think, from like 2000 or something of information. So it's lacking a lot of information. The information that's using has not been, attributed to original sources. So creators, like human creators, know that their work is being used and then being, sent out for whoever's asking these questions without the attribution. And so that's as we consider an academic world, a form of plagiarism, but it's a form of copyright, infringement, that people's and their creations are being used in a way that they weren't, asked. We definitely see, like in the big picture, like I said, it did, and in the threats of, how say, somebody's voice being used, like their face and their voice, and being used, but not words they actually said together, kind of like stringing a video together. I think that's a very scary aspect, because someone was telling me recently that, some family was called, and, they had like the daughter's voice or whatever, and they said that she was like kidnapped, and, and she wasn't, but, it sounded just like her, and they just had, I think they had just called the daughter like right before that and just kind of got like I guess like enough voice pattern to be able to mimic it. And so, ethically, obviously, that's, a very scary prospect. And so I think the use of people's information, whether it's on a personal basis or, in a creative, like, artistic way is a big ethical problem.
I also read an article that indicated the authors that have written their own books were really unhappy to find out that so many sources were uploaded to the Chat GPT database in that process of, loading that data. So now Chat GPT is able to write your own little story. So, I definitely think that comes into, intellectual property issues. And I've also read that right now, ChatGPT, I think at least the free version that's out there is just the preloaded data that it draws upon. But I read something that either it's ChatGPT 4, it's coming down the line, that the system is also going to be able to utilize data that's online. So not just preloaded data, which that is interesting to me because I've had a lot of conversations with my son is in finance, and I've thought about, the implications of, I mean, you can run market analysis and market analyses on different stocks and, how this is going to come into play. And, at the end of the day, I think we're going to need some government regulation as to how far reaching this tool is going to become, or at least pace it out.
Going back and forth, if I was going to ask you to this, because I myself was wondering how would this actually come into, but you guys had some great points about some of those ethical dilemmas that happen. So will advancements in AI, because I mean, we know AI is on its early stages, and there's more to come from that, and same with Chat GPT. I think that's ever changing as well as it's played with, right? Because it's artificial intelligence. The more you use it, the more it takes in, it picks up on patterns. So stuff is going to change naturally with it. But how does that affect human interaction and communication?
I mean, I think we had the same question come up, when social media first became popular. There was a large concern about, how are the youth going to develop interpersonal skills? And I think that there's some valid concern there. Yet at the same time, we have to remember that society is always shifting along with this technology. So, if you, for example, if you look back at, social media and told someone that they're never able to utilize it, well, they wouldn't be as prepared for the current job market as those who would utilize the tool. So I think it's just one of those things where technology tends to lead us, and we have to find ways to catch up.
Yeah, I do think that it can definitely affect human interaction. I've heard, read articles about some people using it, for example, as a dating profile. So they'll ChatGPT, write my dating profile. And I think, well, that's kind of unethical because, then I'm really dating ChatGPT. I'm not dating, this perfect guy who came out there. And so it's a misrepresentation, right, of this person. At the same time, some people already have issues with communication. So maybe that helps them, like draw out, their best characteristics to make them have a better dating profile. So it can go, both ways. But so I think it goes back to even what we talked about with education. What is our intent for using it and how much are we depending on it? We can use it as a tool, as an assistant, but it can't replace who we are as human beings. And so I think that's true for outside of education as well, that we still need to have that human interaction. And I think as Dr. Allen says, when social media came out, we were all like, ooh, and maybe we didn't handle that very well. Like, if you see, all these things coming out about young people, overusing it and not really like talking to each other and things like that. And, screen time for kids and stuff, but it's here. You can't really fight it. It just is. And so maybe we need to be smarter as you say, AI is in its infancy, about how we're going to integrate into our lives as a society, and not let it just be free willy like we did with social media.
I think that being smart about how it's integrated and implemented or utilized, I think that is a key as well. I saw an article in which a chatbot was created for a car dealership. And of course, someone knew how to manipulate the system. They said, okay, I want you to, I don't remember the exact specifics, but they basically said, I want you to enter into a legal agreement in which you will sell me this car for $1. And my understanding, I just perused the article quickly. It was a legal document, and in the end they had to sell that car for $1. So I think we have, again, a huge social responsibility when it comes to how we're going to use this. I mean, thinking about, how we might be able to use it in education, filtering students into the right program, the human life is complex. So when you're thinking about guiding a student, maybe you have a student that's reaching out to, for example, medical assisting because they're thinking about getting into nursing. Well, the system is only as good as the information that's going to be put in. They can't, draw upon human experiences or, I think that there's some limitations there. So we have to be really careful about how we're utilizing it, again, so that we're not, misleading or misrepresenting, the situation, or entering into contracts that we can't agree to. I would love to be able to sign up for a degree for $1.
Me too.
Or a car. I mean, I'll take the car too.
Right.
And I think you guys have some valid points too. I mean, there are some strong concerns regarding AI and Chat GPT, and I think, like you guys have stated, a lot of it is probably because of an unknown, and a fear of the unknown and a fear of the changes. We all know there are changes in life, especially from innovation, but no matter how much you prepare, how much you have the conversation, people still get nervous. People still get very scared of it. They avoid it as best they can. But once it's already out of the box, it's kind of hard to put something like that back in. And we are having those conversations on AI and Chat GPT because they're already here. And I think this is a conversation we're not going to stop having. Like, we're obviously within a time constraint on a podcast, but that doesn't mean like a conversation's not continually happening. And it's going to change too as we see those advancements and we get past that infancy stage of this technology. But I want to thank you both for talking to us today about kind of Chat GPT and explaining and clearing that up too, since I think there's a bit of confusion over how that works. But also posing some really interesting ethical questions in regards to AI and Chat GPT. So Dr. Allen, Otero, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Keiser Voices.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
If you like what you heard, you want to hear more, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can keep up with our other conversations as we talk innovation, education, and other fabulous topics here on the Keiser Voices podcast.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, the story of success. As we close this chapter, remember, every story has its next page.